Okay, Kelly, so tell me, when did you first fall in love with these movies, these Star Wars movies?
Oh gosh, ever since I was little, I'm old enough to remember seeing Return of the Jedi in the movie theater. I think I was 5 or 6, so my whole
Wow.
life basically has
Yeah, you look
been
good
on Star
for
Wars.
40 something, I have to say. I
Thank
mean,
you.
I'm 47 and I feel like an old man next to you here on the screen.
Yeah, I'm in 40 something, so yeah, I've I'm an original trilogy kid all the way. And so, yeah, we grew up watching a VHS copy taped off of HBO and watched those over and over and over. And, we didn't have, back then, obviously didn't have smartphones or a way to take the movies with us. So I had my little Discman and my headphones, and I would take the first soundtrack with me everywhere, or when I was feeling kind of sad or alone or whatever. And I would just watch the movie that way by listening to the
Mm,
music and closing my eyes and just watching it in my imagination. So yeah, it's always been there in the memory and in my life. So I'm pretty lucky
yeah.
to be able to to keep it there.
Yeah, it's amazing to think, isn't it, that we've existed in a world where, I mean, I was born in 76. I don't remember my first year of life, so my whole life it's been there, the sounds, the visuals. Like you say, listening to the soundtrack sometimes you know the scene, don't you? Know the bit of dialogue that goes with that scene, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy. So when you've written this amazing book, co-wrote this amazing book with Clayton Sandell and St. Bende as well, the visual archive or a visual archive of Return of the Jedi. Wh- It must be pretty cool for you as a fan to be doing something like this. I know you've had a couple of books related to Star Wars and movies out already, but Return of the Jedi clearly means a lot to you, so it must be pretty cool to have your name on this.
It does, yeah. The reason I remember seeing Return of the Jedi at such a young age was the right when the Ewok steals the speeder near the end, the film strip snapped, it broke, and the
Oh
whole
no.
audience started yelling at the screen, and so that moment was really burned into my memory. I don't know if I saw the end of the movie after that. I can't remember what happened after, but that's one of my first like movie going memories. So Return of the Jedi was already pretty special, and then to get the chance to work with Clayton and ST on this, yeah, it seemed like a nice coming together of everything that
Mm.
Star
So
Wars has been for me.
did you approach the publisher or did they approach you? How did that work?
They approached us, and then we were
Mm.
each. They already had the idea, like the basic layout in mind at that point when they came to us, and so they gave us each section. Sadly, I did not have the Ewoks stealing the
Oh.
speeder in my section, but I did have a lot of other fun parts to write about. So yeah, we were assigned that, and then we each took off on our own, researching and looking into the sections we were assigned. So it was a very segmented process, but at the same time, we helped each other out with sources and things like that.
Mm. And of course, there have been a lot of books, quite a few books about Return of the Jedi. Of course, there's the Rinsler book, there's Philip Peach's book from back in the day, the kind of like diary almost. There's The Art of Return of the Jedi. And of course, it's appeared in many other books as well to do with the trilogy. What was it that made you, or what did you do to make sure that what you created here is something different? What was the sort of ethos of the book?
So what sets this book apart from something like Rinsler's amazing behind the scenes book is that this book focuses a little bit more on the connections that branched out from Return of the Jedi as much as it does the behind the scenes. So it'll talk about an element of Return, maybe that premiered in Return of the Jedi, how they made it, the thinking and philosophy behind it, but then how that one section kind of grew things like The Mandalorian or the Book of Boba Fett, or even things like the Droids cartoon or the Ewok movies,
Yeah.
like immediately following the release of the film. So it was a really fun project to not just look at behind the scenes and use some of those amazing sources you mentioned, but then to, take a look at more recent Star Wars and say, oh, that thing came from Return of the Jedi. I had no idea that that's where we first saw it. And so that was a really fun process of discovery while working on the book.
Yeah, and some of those things are concepts that Ralph McQuarrie might have come up with, or
Yeah.
Neil Rodis or Joe Johnson might have come up with, that we've then seen subsequently in these shows. I mean, even seeing The Acolyte this week, you see that kind of entryway with it's almost like a pergola almost
Mm-hmm.
that was
Yeah,
in
I
some
know.
of the original drawings for Jabba's
Right.
palace, which you see in the book. So it's cool to see those connections, isn't it? Was that something that was there from the start, the idea of connecting it to the more recent Star Wars shows?
Yeah, I think that was actually probably where they started the idea with, is because
Mm,
there are so many, wonderful behind the scenes sources of information. Like I think they wanted to focus it on the visuals. That's why they call it the visual archive, or
mm,
the behind the scenes or making of book. And so yeah, like things like the Coruscant images that Ralph McQuarrie made, they just used recently in the last season of The Mandalorian, things like
Yeah.
that. Like you said, that they, they designed so long ago, 1981, 82, that we still are now seeing for the first time in Star Wars. It's such an amazing and unique element of Star Wars. I think that it's just fun.
Yeah. Were the photos already selected, or did you have any say in the photos? Like once you've written your part, whether it's about what was one of the sections you said you wrote, sorry, in particular?
Oh no, I didn't say. I did the battle in space around the Death Star 2, for example.
Okay.
So the classic shot of like the Falcon flying toward the screen and the Death Star
Yes.
2 behind it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was one
So
of my sections.
you then provided with the photographs that your text is going to fit within, or did you say maybe could we change this photograph to complement that? Was it a two-way street?
Yeah, it was a little of both, but more often than not, the images were already picked, and I think here and there I had a suggestion, but mostly it was already chosen, which is good, because I think if we had been given a choice, I probably would have been lost for weeks just looking through the photos.
I know. I mean, that's kind of my dream, to get into the archive and
Right.
watch all of the behind the scenes material. I believe there's like 350 hours of behind the scenes material, the original trilogy, and I can't imagine how many photos there are. I mean, I'd just do that for the rest of my life, quite
I
happily.
know, and I mean, by Jedi, they probably had the most of any movie. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so much fun stuff just in the book that I can't imagine all the
Yeah.
things they got to look through.
And as somebody who has created their own Return of the Jedi book, an unofficial one, let's say, and also an unofficial documentary about Return of the Jedi, I have read everything and seen everything that is available for Return of the Jedi. So it's very cool to go through this book and go, hang on, I've never seen that particular drawing before. I loved that really simple sketch from Nilo Rodis Jamiro of the ATST. I don't think I've ever seen that before. In fact, I know Nilo, I've chatted to him a few times. I've sent him that picture today just to say to him, because when I interviewed him a couple of years ago, and then I interviewed him again this last month. So this episode of you and I talking is going to be sandwiched between two episodes of Nilo and I having a chat.
Wow.
And he was talking to me about just those early concepts, just trying to create something iconic, with just some simple lines. And he said the detail was then up to the modelers and, the model makers and the people filming the shots. So it's cool to see some of the really early stuff like that. And then all those lovely inserts as well. Like if anybody's got the Steve Sansweet book, the Star Wars Archive, there's lots of those little inserts. So you get like a cell of the droids cartoon, or you might get like a tattoo or a ion-on transfer. There's stuff like that in the book. So the book itself is a kind of little voyage of discovery, isn't it, for the reader? Because you come across these pages and you kind of go, oh, hang on a minute, this one folds out 3 times and I get to see a bigger view. Something that's very cool concept.
Those are my favorite. The Ralph McQuarrie concept art, that I guess it's called a gatefold, that kind of opens up to like 4 pages. Those are my favorite.
Yeah.
We actually didn't know, me, Clayton, and ST, that those were going to be in there, because we'd only seen the digital PDFs on our screen.
Yeah, okay.
So when we got copies of the book, we were like, oh my gosh, there's like Polaroids, fake Polaroids, but Polaroids and stickers and all sorts of stuff in there.
The thing is with Star Wars, like, as I said, we've got these other books that have been made, the Rinsler book, the Peacher book, and all of those. Star Wars fans love detail, of course. I mean, there's a bit in the book, I think, where, you might say that, this was shot at Elstree. You could go and say this is shot on a Wednesday. It was, 25 degrees. It was raining. Richard Marquand was unwell this day. You could go into so much detail. How much did you have to sort of rein yourself in to make sure that this was not getting bogged down in those kind of details?
That's a good question. I would say pretty often, because, the Rinsler book goes into so much detail. It has so many, and there's so many things to just kind of discover about the movie that, that I personally didn't know before, that I was like, that's a cool fact. And so I wanted to try and put all that in. So yeah, it's definitely fighting against the little space of the text versus all the cool things that I think would be fun to share it out.
Was there any ever, because you're, as I said, you're looking at these books, you're probably getting Star Wars Insider articles and Star Wars.com articles and stuff. Were there ever any points where there was some conflicting information and you had to go back to Lucasfilm to say, hang on, which of these is true? Because you do find that sometimes over the years, people tell their stories and they grow and they change. And
I can't think of a specific instance. I was lucky enough that a lot of my sections focused on things like the old Bantha Tracks newsletter and things like that I watched or read, and then I found some old documentaries that people like Ken Ralston had done, and so I just kind of focused on their words specifically, but I never saw any real conflict because I think at the time those were all recorded at the time, so I think the memories were more fresh.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've spoken to Ken as well, and as soon as you say Ken on a documentary, I think it's probably that one. It was shown here in the UK as Horizon: How to
Yes,
Film
that's
the
the one.
Impossible. Yeah, where he talks about that particular shot with having more elements than any other
Than
shot.
any other, yeah, I wanted to make sure
SB
to mention that.
19 or something. I think it's called
17
SB9.
maybe, yeah.
SB 17, yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
was that was my
Crazy.
chapter. Yeah, that was
Yeah,
such a
yeah.
fun. I was so happy to find that documentary because it was so interesting, and they had so much footage of him placing every element on the screen, and you could see how it moved. Yeah, that's exactly right. That
There's that
documentary.
shot in that documentary. I don't think it's Ken talking. I think it might be another ILM guy where he's got that kind of grid of where all the ships cross each other. And he puts a cross in every box every time one has to overlap another, and whether it's behind or in front. And it just kind of blows your mind
Yes.
that they had to go to that level of detail and understand that as a sort of hold that as a mental idea, that shot,
Mhm.
to sort of render it on the screen. And I mean, now we can use tools to previs and all of that kind of stuff. But back then, I mean, it's quite something. I think this book almost is like a gateway to the original trilogy for younger viewers of the newer stuff, the new films. Because of course,
Yeah.
like I keep thinking of myself as like I'm an original trilogy guy, but now there are people who are talking about the prequels like I talked about the original trilogy,
Yes, I
because it's
love that.
25 years old already.
Yes.
Um, so you watch things like, The Acolyte, and you're going, oh, this feels really prequely. And you suddenly realize there's more prequely feeling Star Wars out there than there is original trilogy stuff now.
Yes, I love
Um,
prequel kids. Yeah.
yeah, no, it's amazing. But yeah, I feel like this is a good way for people to kind of go, oh, okay, that's where that comes from, and you sort of trace it back to
Yes.
its origins. Do you find as a Star Wars fan, like looking back through the book, that you enjoy the bits that you weren't involved with
Oh yeah,
Clayton's work?
I've looked through Clayton's and ST's chapters, and
Yeah.
there were things that I didn't have any idea. Like just every time I flip through it, I read something, and I was like, I had no idea. What was the one? I didn't know that Ula, the original actress, came back for the special edition to
Yes.
film her new scene. I had no idea, and I just
Femi
found that out
Taylor,
the other
yeah.
day. Yeah, when I was
Yeah,
flipping through
and
the book.
she looked amazing. Like, I mean, this is
I couldn't
20
tell.
something years later, and nobody
Yes.
knew. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
that's
I remember
like
that at
every
the time,
page
just
has that.
going, wow, she did well.
I literally couldn't tell. It was
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
So yeah, but there's so many fun things like that in this book that I just love as a fan to find new things out.
Yeah, we do love a fact, don't we, us Star Wars fans?
Oh yeah, we
Definitely.
do.
I think one of the best things about doing my podcast is that I get to revisit and research, and deep dive into things, but also in having these conversations with people that worked on the movies, it's also trying not to research too much so that there's something fresh that can come out of it. I want to get past people's kind of regular stories that they've told over and over again, and get those out of the way and get into the deeper stuff. And I think this book does that as well. There's certainly some things where I've flicked through and I'm like, oh, well, I've seen that picture before. And then I think, hang on a minute, he's got a different expression here
Yeah.
in that shot. And, it might be one of the outtake photos that wasn't used previously, or it might be, I like those Polaroids. I've not seen those Polaroids with the little insert. I've not seen them that big before. I think they're in JW's book in the column somewhere, little tiny inserts. And same with the writing as well. Like some of the facts, I was like, yeah, I know this bit. Oh, hang on a minute. How do I not know this
Yes. Those are my favorite facts.
So, yeah. Did you go to sources that were outside of the kind of Lucasfilm archive? You mentioned that documentary, How to Film the Impossible. Were you like trawling through YouTube and other places as well, and other magazines like, I don't know, Starlog or anything like that?
I think I did look through Starlog for. Yes, I did, because Richard Marquand had done an interview I'd never read before. I found there things like Star Wars Celebration interviews. I found a lot of things that I probably wouldn't have found otherwise. Yeah, so there's lots of places I think out there now. Like I said, luckily they kept so much information for the behind the scenes and tracked so much of what they did that we had some really great references to look at.
Talking of Celebration, are you going to Japan?
Yes, well we got our passes, and we're looking at our flights now, so that's the plan.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm here in London, so I went to London Was it last year? It was last year.
Yes.
I did a panel on for ILM on Andor.
Oh,
So I hosted a
wow.
panel with the VFX and special effects team, and that was amazing. I'd never done anything like that before. It's just off the back of doing this podcast. Are you getting involved in any panels and things, do you think, while you're out
I
there?
hope I hope so. I write for StarWars.com, so I'll definitely be
Yeah.
doing a little bit of work, probably covering panels and whatnot. But
Mm.
so far, I don't know if I'll be on a panel. I hope so.
Maybe there's time to get another book out before you go, and
Maybe.
it'd be great to see a book about the sort of Star Wars in Japan, because Japan
It's
is one of
so
those few
fun.
places that I used to travel a lot for my work. I worked for Formula One motor racing, so I used to go around the world constantly, like for 20 years. And Japan was one of the places that I would love to go to because it feels so different. Like, they have their very individual culture, and you'll be in places where you won't see a Roman character, for hours, kind of thing. And I love when you see Star Wars things there, because it's like it's a robot version of a Star Wars character, or
Yes.
you know or they've
It,
done a manga of it or something like that. So I think that would be really cool. That'd be a
yeah, I
really
think
cool
it's gonna be a lot
concept.
of fun. I didn't get to go to
Yeah.
London, so
You
I'm
didn't?
looking
Oh,
forward to no, so I'm looking forward to going in 2025.
be interesting to see who they get out there for it's a long way to go for
I know.
stars of the movies, but I guess we've got a lot of fresh raring to go stars now with these new TV shows like The Acolyte and Mandalorian and everything else. So
Yeah,
maybe we'll see them there. Yeah,
I hope
yeah,
so.
yeah. I'll be at home watching it on the streaming in the middle of the night.
Yeah, that's a good point. The timing's gonna be a little funny.
Yeah. So have you got plans for more books? I know you've written your Marvel book, and you've got your Be More Obi-Wan and your Star Wars dad jokes. It is Father's Day here next weekend in
Oh,
the UK. So
might
that
be
is on
here
the
too.
list. I've given a few nudges to people, to my daughters. But yeah, have you got plans to write any more books in the Star Wars universe?
Yeah, we've got in the fall, there's a new updated Star Wars encyclopedia coming out. I was part of a team for
Nice.
that one.
Hmm.
And then I think there's one that hasn't been announced yet.
Oh, right. You have to be careful not to
I
mention it.
do
Yeah.
say it's another visual archive, but that's all I can
Ooh.
say.
Oh, well, I hope it's Empire. Working backwards. You don't have
All
to
of
say
them
anything.
are would make amazing. Each movie
Yeah,
would
I
make an
mean,
amazing.
I think, yeah, Empire Strikes Back for me has probably got the most kind of iconic ships and characters and locations and costumes. And if ever I start sort of doubting my love for Star Wars, I just put on the Empire Strikes Back and,
Oh.
fall back in love with it again.
Yes, that's me with the first one. Like I said, the music and everything, that's the one that I no,
Yes,
no, yeah.
yeah.
So I understand.
It's funny you say about listening to the soundtrack and stuff. I really kind of fell in love with Star Wars after taping it off the TV, but I only had audio tape. So I used to know the film inside out. I used to put my cassette
Yeah.
recorder up against the TV, and that's how I kind of fell in love with it. And here I am, age 48, still talking about it. It's crazy.
It's we're so lucky.
Yeah, yeah. Is your house adorned with? I can see a Darth Vader
Yeah,
mask
there's
or
Vader
something
and
behind you.
Padme.
Yeah, kind
Yeah.
of Padme there.
Just my office mostly. I'm obviously the biggest Star Wars fan in the house, so
Yeah.
I keep it contained in my office
Yes,
mostly.
my wife is very understanding. I have a few bits. I think there's something in every room now, which just a small thing. It might be
Yeah, I'm
just a
sneaking stuff
stormtrooper
in.
hiding in a house plant or something. Yeah.
I have like a Darth Vader spoon rest in the kitchen, little things I can sneak in here and there.
Yeah, yeah. Have you still got anything from back in your childhood when you first fell in love with the movies?
I do the Darth Vader mask you mentioned.
Oh, that's a Don Post.
That's a Don Post from Return of the Jedi.
Nice.
So yeah,
Very nice.
he's made it through. I grew up in Texas, so he made it through Texas summers in the attic, and he moved all the way up here to Seattle with me. Yeah, he's
Oh, wow.
lasted.
Cool. Well, I appreciate your time today, Kelly. And I have to say to people that are listening that it's definitely worth checking out Return of the Jedi: A Visual Guide, because, if you've made me happy reading it, and as I said, I'm somebody who's read everything there is and seen everything there is available, and you've shown me and told me new things. So yeah, definitely check it out, folks. And thanks, Kelly, for your time. And hope to bump into you someday, maybe another Star Wars celebration that isn't in Japan.
Yes, I hope so. I hope so. Thanks
Yeah.
again for chatting with me today.